Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday evening space show program. And I'm your host for the evening, David Livingston. Thank you very, very much. We have a very special guest with us tonight who I'm going to turn to in a minute, to our great space show advisor, Bill Gowan, as he has met the guest before. And at the recent ISTC, I might add. And Bill is a fabulous space show advisory board member, contributor to the program, a great personal friend, really a great guy, engineering background in North Carolina, and even greater because they lost to Oklahoma last night. But that's not part of the space show. Bill, why don't you introduce both Hoot as well as Tony and talk a few minutes about both
Yeah,
of them?
have you started recording yet?
Yes, I am recording.
Okay.
All right, very good. Well, I'll let Hoot introduce Tony here in just a second, but Captain Robert Hoot Gibson, naval fighter pilot with over 300 carrier landings and a five-time space shuttle pilot, four times as a commander, and now an author. Welcome to the space show. Those
Thank
of
you.
us that were,
Thanks very
yes,
much.
those of us that were at the at ISDC this year were treated to a panel discussion with three shuttle astronauts. It was you and Susan Kilrain and Stephen Hawley. That was a fun discussion and a lot of great insights into what it's like to be an astronaut. But you have a book out, came out earlier this year, and it's called Space Ace, a combat pilot's journey from Vietnam to beyond Earth. You are a pilot and an engineer. What made you think you had a book in you? And I'll give you this opportunity to also introduce Tony.
Well, it was all Tony's fault. Um, I had done a children's book uh, called First Flight, and it was based on my story of taking my grandson Andrew flying in my Beechcraft Bonanza. I have a V-tailed Beechcraft Bonanza, and
Mm.
my grandson Andrew loves flying. He loves zero G's. I get airborne and I'm just retracting the landing gear right after takeoff, and Andrew is saying, "Can we do zero G's?" And I say, "Well, we will, Andrew. We got to get some altitude first." Anyway, that gave several of us, the two women that helped me with the book, the idea of writing a book about a grandfather owl named Hoot who is teaching his grandson Andrew how to fly. And so that's how I met Tony, was through the artist Michelle Roche, and the other author that helped me with this was Zarina Salito, who I know from Tucson, and that's what got me to meet Tony, because he published the children's book, and the the book of my life called Space Ace. That came about because Tony said, "Okay, Hoot, that's great. You got a children's book. Now, when are you going to write your book?" And I launched off into the same excuse I've been given for 25 years, saying, "Yeah, I need to do that sometime, and and I'll try to find the time to do that because I want to write it down so my kids and grandkids can know it all. Because I never asked my dad enough questions. My dad was an Army Air Corps pilot, flew the airmail in the 20s and 30s, and survived it. And so I want, and Tony said, "Okay, there's no time like right now. Let's do it. I'll coach you on it. I'll help you through the process." And so that's how I got to meet Tony. Tony is an interesting person as well. Um, he's a former Air Force fighter pilot, flew the F-111, which has swing wings, variable sweep wings like my F-14 Tomcat, which I flew. And he's written, I think, four or five books himself, and he has helped a great many authors to get their works published. And his coaching, I guess I can brag a little bit. His coaching has got Space Ace, which only came out the beginning of March. It's already won 6 awards, and so
Fantastic.
he's been a great help. Now He did, I think, about 15 years in the Air Force, and then went to form Book Press Publishing Incorporated, which is where he does all of this work with authors and publishing. And he's been just a really great help in making it all happen. So that's how I know Tony. I've known him now for, gee, what would it be? 4 years, 5 years.
Thank you.
I think the two of you together did a fantastic job on that book, and I've read Tony's book, A Quarter Million Steps, so I know he's a good writer himself. So, say some words, Tony, so we know your voice.
Well, I think Hoot did from a pure fighter pilot mentality, and former astronaut. I think he did a great job working on his book and writing his book. I joke with him a lot because parts of it, when we first started working on it, had a real mission report vibe to it. So it's like, well, okay, this make it a little more story like and a little less mission reporty. But I thought Hoot did a great job, and he has a great story, and he's a rock star aviator. Let's face it. I mean, nobody, has the history he's got. I mean, I would feel very comfortable in any plane he's flying because I know even if everything dies in it, he'll still find a way down to the ground safely. So, who's flown hundreds of aircraft? He's probably one of the best sticker rudder people NASA's ever had. Probably the Navy too, for that matter. So it's hard for me to say that too because I'm an Air Force guy, and giving compliments to any Navy person for any reason is difficult. Just kidding. So that said, it's been great working with Hoot. In fact, I feel honored to call him a friend. So, and we talk often.
And I'm pleased to have Tony as a friend as well.
Hoot, by the way, I did learn to fly the V-tail Bonanza. That was my high performance plane, but if I was doing zero gravity, I was in deep, deep trouble. So they didn't teach me anything like that to learn to fly that plane. What was your transition like from Navy fighter pilot, Vietnam War era, to space, to Southwest Airlines, to writing books?
Well, it's interesting. I had done quite well as a Navy fighter pilot. I I credit my dad with much of my success. He was an aeronautical engineer and a test pilot. And so I knew from the time I was about 10 years old, I want to be my dad. I want to be an aeronautical engineer and a test pilot. And so I graduated from California Polytechnic State University in aeronautical engineering and right into the Navy, right through pilot training. And I guess I did well in pilot training because I got my first choice, which was F-4 Phantoms out of the West Coast Air Station, Miramar Naval Air Station, which is where Top Gun was. And so, like I say, I guess I did well in training because I got my first choice as an aircraft. And what a thrill that was. At the time, the F-4 Phantom was the world's best all-around fighter. And I flew combat missions in Vietnam in that airplane when I was 25 years old. And I wanted to go to test pilot school. But in between, I got asked to join the first F-14 Tomcat Squadron. So I made two deployments in the Phantom. We flew F-4B Phantoms, F-4Bs, because the F-4Js, which is the other model the Navy has, those were too heavy for the USS Coral Sea, which had shorter catapults. And so I flew F-4Bs and then made two cruises in the Phantom. And then I got invited to join the first operational F-14 Tomcat Squadron, Fighter Squadron 1, and made the first cruise, which was aboard the Enterprise. And most people don't know that the F-14 Tomcat had any combat missions at all in Vietnam, but we had a quasi-combat mission. The day Saigon fell, April the 30th, 1975, I flew combat air patrol armed with everything, all the missiles that airplane would carry and the 20 millimeter Gatling gun full of rounds. I flew a quote combat mission over Saigon the day the helicopters were landing on the rooftops and on the embassy grounds and getting our people out of there. The absolute last day of the Vietnam War. And Well, from there, I wanted to go to test pilot school, and I had to spend about 9 months as an instructor in what we call the RAG, the Readiness Air Group for the F-14 Tomcat. So flew about 9 months as an instructor in the F-14, and then got to go to test pilot school, which was the dream of my life. And but along the way, I had heard about this newfangled space vehicle that they're building called the Space Shuttle. And when I saw that in a picture artist concept in Aviation Week magazine of a space shuttle gliding back in to land on a runway, not splash down in the ocean under parachutes, I said, "Wow, that's for me. I want to do that." And so I applied in 1977, interviewed in 1977, in the fall of 1977. Got my phone call from the director of flight operations at NASA Johnson Space Center on January the 16th, 1978, saying, "Well, if you're not against it and you're still interested, we'd like to pick you for this astronaut class." So that's how that all happened. Now, it was interesting. I was fairly accomplished at that point in jet fighters, having made 3 deployments, 3 cruises, 2 in the Phantom and 1 in the Tomcat. But I walked in the door at NASA, and all of a sudden it hit me, you know what? I don't know anything anymore. How do I get electrical power on a space shuttle? How do I get hydraulic power? How do I get temperature control? How do I change orbits? How do I do everything? So all of a sudden, I felt kind of dumb. So it was a long buildup of training before you're going to be ready to make your first flight.
I have a question going back. I'm just curious. Do you remember what your orders were when you were flying cover for the evacuation off the roof of the American Embassy? Did you have orders that allowed you to interfere or fire or do anything like that?
We were cleared to fire. Yes, we were cleared to fire. Now, the only thing that we're going to be firing on um, would have been if any MiGs had come up or any, I don't know, maybe a T-28 with guns on it from the South Vietnamese Air Force, taken over by the North Vietnamese or something. But we had a clear to fire, and we almost had a vector on a helicopter that was firing at a barge coming down the river to evacuate the U.S. consulate from Dak To, I think it was. And the trouble was we didn't have enough fuel. We could not take that vector. But we had a clear to fire because the helicopter was strafing the barge.
Uh-huh.
And so we were prepared. We were prepared for battle. And I had seen battle before, so it would have been something fairly easy for us to do, but there wasn't any fuel in the air, and we didn't have enough fuel to go as far as we were going to have to go, so wound up coming back and landing back aboard USS Enterprise.
Did you have SEER training at the time that they put you through?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Everyone that went to Vietnam had SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training. And yeah, one of your pleasurable experiences was being a POW, because the course was a week long, and the first 5 days or so were survival training. And we were up in the mountains above San Diego at Warner Springs,
Right.
and trying to find food. But every week there was another class there, so anything that could be eaten had pretty much already been eaten. We got permission to chop down a bee tree because we found bee's nest in that tree, and we got permission to chop the tree down. So we all got a bit of an energy burst from eating honeycomb up there. But then it was into POW training, and that was memorable because every one of us got waterboarded. That was part of your training. You got waterboarded. Now, some years later, the president made a big deal out of us waterboarding people. Okay, it's unpleasant. Is it going to kill you? No, it isn't. Is it going to injure you? No, it isn't. but it's highly unpleasant. And and there were a lot of people that, in order to make it stop, were ready to say anything. And I had been a competitive swimmer and a lifeguard, and so I was pretty comfortable in water. So I made it through the waterboarding. However, if I wasn't being cooperative enough in my interrogation by the simulated bad guys, they'd say, "How'd you like to be waterboarded again?" And of course, that got your attention right away because the answer was, "Well, really, no, I would not like to be waterboarded again." But it, it was a little bit traumatic, but it wasn't going to harm you. It wasn't going to injure you. But that was probably the height of unpleasantness in our POW training. I got thrown to the ground and thrown up against the wall and things like that. But the waterboarding was the most memorable.
I remember working with the Marine Corps, and we went up quarterly to do ambush and counter ambush and harassment training of naval personnel and inexperienced Marine Corps people going to Vietnam. And of course, the people directing it were all combat vets. So I loved it because we got to play with all sorts of big explosive weapons and blanks on our M16 and all. I mean, it was a real fun week for me rather than being at NavFib school. But anyway, our guest Phil Swan from Seattle has a question who's been waiting for a while.
Oh, sure.
My question was more of a space question, and I'm finding this the wartime stories are fascinating. So I don't really want to change the subject, but I'll ask my question anyway. I noticed you were wearing an Atlantis shirt, and it occurred to me that maybe the astronauts and the commanders of the space shuttles actually were some way affiliated with certain space shuttles. Like you maybe learned the quirks and the ins and out of this particular space shuttle, and you were like paired up with that space shuttle and it became your favorite. I was wondering if that was the case or if they were all the same to you. And how does it work?
The goal had been to make them all exactly the same. And that couldn't really be done because of Columbia. Columbia was the first one to go to space, and there were some uncertainties in structure, and there were a few uncertainties in the thermal protection system, the tiles that protected the aluminum body of the space shuttle from the several thousand degrees of reentry and 1,500 degrees of launch. It got pretty hot during launch as well. But Columbia was built a little bit heavier. I understand it's about 7,000 empty weight, 7,000 pounds heavier than the other space shuttles. But other than that, the attempt was to make all the controls and displays exactly the same. Now, Columbia, once again, because it was the first one to go to space, it had several control panels that were from DFI, Developmental Flight Instrumentation. And so it had some panels that none of the other orbiters had. I flew Challenger on my first mission, and then I flew Columbia on my second one, and Columbia felt a little more solid. I guess perhaps because it was built heavier, it felt a little more solid to me than Challenger. But then from there, I flew Atlantis and then Endeavor, and then I flew Atlantis a second time, and they were really pretty much identical except for Columbia.
You've actually flown almost all the shuttles. Is there any you haven't flown?
Oh, I didn't, instead of flying Atlantis a second time, I should have flown Discovery, and I would have flown all five.
Yeah, that
But
would have put you in the record books.
I flew Atlantis twice, so that
Right.
messed everything up.
Were all your landings
So-
at the Cape, or did you land out at Mojave or ever at White Sands on the few times they did that?
All of my landings were at the Cape and at Edwards Air Force Base. So my first mission to space aboard Challenger, we made the first landing at Cape Canaveral. And this was the 10th launch of a space shuttle in February 1984. And as I say, the 10th mission of a shuttle. Prior to that, the weather just had not cooperated with us being able to land at the Cape. So my crew and I were the lucky ones that got to make the very first landing at Cape Canaveral. And then my second mission, we were supposed to land at Cape Canaveral right at sunrise, and the weather refused to cooperate for 3 days in a row. And finally, on the third day, Mission Control said, guys, we give up. The weather's bad at the Cape again. Take it one more orbit and land it at Edwards. And so that put us into a night landing. So my first landing as a commander was an unplanned night landing. Now, I could see that that was very possible to happen because if we didn't land at Florida right at sunrise, any other landing opportunity because of our orbit was going to be a night landing. So my co-pilot, actually called pilot, and funny story there, the two pilots on board are called the commander and the pilot. And I'm sure that early in the game, they made the co-pilot called the pilot because astronauts are such prima donnas, nobody was willing to be called co-pilot. So the two pilots are the commander and the pilot. So my co-pilot, Charlie Bolden, who retired as a major general and went on to be the NASA administrator, and I had done the majority of our training at night, because if you can land it at night, you can certainly land it in the daytime. So we were, I say it was an unplanned night landing. We were trained and prepared for it. And sure enough, that's what happened. So my first landing as a commander was an unplanned night landing.
Did you think the shuttle should have been retired? I talked to a lot of people back then, and they said they had a lot of life left in them. We shouldn't have retired them when we did.
I agree with that. I agree with that. The design phase was aimed at 100 launches per shuttle, and we never got close to that. And so they did have plenty of life left in them. What happened was we lost Challenger, and then we lost Columbia, and it became very apparent that when it works, it's a wondrous machine and it does really fantastic things. When it goes wrong, we're going to kill the entire crew. And I think NASA lost their stomach for doing that. And so that was the big decision, I think, to retire it. And the feeling was capsules and parachutes are safer than the space shuttle, which I'm not sure I agree with. I knew one of NASA's great parachute experts, John Kiker, who did all the parachutes for Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. And he taught me a lot about parachutes, and parachutes can be very unforgiving. And so I guess I shouldn't complain about it because it's over and done. But I didn't think we should have retired the space shuttles. The big mistake that we made when we designed the space shuttles was we said they're going to be like an airliner to space, and this was the shtick that NASA put out from the very beginning. This is going to be the airliner to space, and you don't wear a parachute on an airliner, so you're not going to need a parachute on the shuttle. So my first two missions, I did not have a parachute at all, not so much as a lightweight glider parachute, and I complained about it a little, but of course, there was nothing we could do. And so after the Challenger accident, it is just possible that if they had had pressure suits and parachutes on the Challenger, we could have saved between 0 and 7 of the crew members. So maybe we would have saved nobody, but certainly without a pressure suit and without a parachute, there was no hope when the vehicle was destroyed.
That night landing that you just described was, I think that was January of '86, right?
Yes, it was.
So that was the mission that immediately preceded the fateful Challenger launch. And there were a lot of challenges getting your launch off in January. I'm sure you imagine that all those challenges with your launch had something to do with the pressure to launch Challenger in late January.
Absolutely, Bill, because we were supposed to launch on December the 18th, 1985, And that got delayed by 1 day because they still had paperwork they needed to close out for the aft section of the orbiter. And so we attempted to launch on December the 19th, 1985. We got down to 14 seconds to go. And I was looking right at our onboard countdown clock and I saw 14 and then 20 minutes, which means we have scrubbed. And I said to the crew over the intercom, guys, we just scrubbed. Countdown clock went to 20 minutes. And so it wasn't something that they could fix right away. It was one of the electronic boxes in one of the solid rocket boosters. If we had launched that day, we would have been the coldest launch. So we might have been the Challenger accident because we found out later that the cold weather was a huge factor in the loss of Challenger. So we came back in early January and we manned up on January the 6th. We manned up on January the 7th. We manned up on January the 10th, and we didn't launch on any of those days. And finally, on January the 12th, we launched and we're on our way, but we delayed almost an entire month. And Challenger was the next mission, 51L aboard Challenger was the very next one. There was a big hurry to get it out of the way because the next flight was Astro. And every day they slid, they were losing science. They were losing more and more science every time they had a delay. And so that's where so much of that pressure came from especially from the booster people. And of course, the engineers for the booster rockets were the ones that didn't want to launch, but their management overruled them. And the NASA types who were heading up the booster systems for NASA, they didn't want to be responsible for another delay caused by the boosters. And so they're the ones that put such great pressure on the engineers from Thiokol and caused us to have that disaster. And so that was, you're very right, Bill, when you say we probably had some doing in the rush to get Challenger off the pad.
Let's take some of the questions. People have their hands up. Dallas, why don't you lead off, please?
Yeah, Hoot, great. I was reading the description of your book on Amazon, and I was surprised to read about the classified mission that's there and the damage you had on your vehicle, and then how that led maybe to the discovery problem. Can you talk about that at all, about where the damage was, what it was, what caused it, etc.?
Sure, Dallas, and you know, it didn't make the news when it happened
No, it
because
did not.
we were a top secret mission.
Yeah.
And you know, our launch day was announced, but our launch time was not. All that was announced would be a launch window, and we will launch within this 4-hour window, is what was said. And what happened to us was at max Q, maximum dynamic pressure, the ablative nose cap of the right booster rocket disintegrated and showered my right wing and damaged more than 700 tiles. Now, as opposed to what happened to Columbia a number of years later, they didn't know that they had a hole in the wing. We knew we had damaged tiles because the day after we launched, Mission Control told us, hey, we want you to take the robot arm. We had the robot arm on board to deploy our payload, which was an intelligence satellite. We had the robot arm, and so we swung it over the top of the orbiter and looked at the underside of our right wing. And I'll never forget, I didn't say it out loud, I said it to myself, we are going to die because we had more than 700 damaged tiles. From the angle we were looking with the robot arm, which was all we could do, we could not see that we had one tile entirely gone. We had one tile that was entirely missing. Now, we survived the reentry because in that location, there was a thick steel plate, and I believe I was told that it had something to do with the ground plane antenna for the L-band system. And so we survived the reentry. Now there was a there was a huge failure to communicate on the part of mission control. And when I saw the tile damage, I keyed the mic and I said, Houston, we're seeing a lot of tile damage on the right wing. I think that's pretty clear, what I said. There wasn't ambiguous at all. And at first, DOD wanted no TV downlink whatsoever, just in case we showed something classified.
Mm.
And, the funny thing is, by then we had already launched the satellite,
Yeah.
which was the classified part. We had already turned it loose, but they didn't want any video at all. And they finally said, okay, we'll let them send down encrypted video. And apparently what they saw on the ground was of poor enough resolution that on the ground they concluded, well, Hoot's all screwed up. He's not seeing tile damage. He's just seeing lights and shadows. Now, they never told me that. All they did was they came back, they studied it for about a full day, and then they came back and they said, okay, it's no problem, just re-enter like always. I was incredulous.
Yeah.
I
So,
keyed the mic. Yeah.
so you didn't I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You didn't have any leading edge damage though in that mission, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We survived because we did not have a hole in the leading edge. And of course, that's what caused the destruction of Columbia. So with ours, it was just tiles.
Did you guys heat up inside? Did you feel any additional heat than normally you would feel?
Not any more than usual. Not any more than usual. But I'll tell you, all the way down on reentry, I was watching our elevons, which of course are our control surfaces on the trailing edge of the wings. And I knew if we started to burn through the right wing, the drag would go up on that side. And to balance the drag, the left elevon would go down. Because at that high angle of attack during reentry, that elevon doesn't produce lift. It produces nothing but drag.
Right.
And so putting it down farther would match the drag. And if I saw that, then I knew I might have 60 seconds to tell mission control what we thought of their analysis. Because all they told us was they said, when they said, it's no problem, just come back like always. And I keyed the mic and I said, Dave, I think it was Dave Hilmers was the Capcom. I said, Dave, what are they basing that on? And he said, well, let me get that answer. And he came back and he said, well, they say it's no worse than anything we've seen on other flights before. And then I should have argued with it. But I said, okay, well, but it was considered bad form to argue with mission control by an astronaut.
But what would your options have been? I mean, you didn't have a backup way to land, did you?
That's right. It would have been to come home anyway. And so maybe that was part of their rationale was, okay, there's nothing we can do about it and they've got to come back anyway. So let's just go ahead and risk them.
Yeah.
But, the problem was they didn't say, we don't think you're seeing tile damage. We think you're just seeing lights and shadows. If they had told me that, I would have said, okay, I'm going to send you clear video and you can look at what I'm looking at.
So follow on. When I was working the next generation launch technology project with Langley, one of the things we heard was NASA had seen a lot of damage on the tile on the base of the shuttle over the years, mainly on the right side. And since it hadn't caused a problem before, it wasn't a problem, which led to the discovery issue, in my view.
Well, and I'm sure that was their attitude. Well, and just like Challenger,
right?
Hey, I burned O-rings on both of my first two missions.
Yeah,
burned O-rings,
right.
And well, hey, we got away with it before. We'll get away with it this time too. That's not a good attitude to have. If you are the management making life and death decisions, we'll probably get away with it one more time.
Yeah. Well, thank God you're still here.
Well,
John Hunt, you want to speak up? You got your hand up. John Hunt.
Yes, I was on the issue, the end of the shuttle and all after obviously Columbia. I mean, the issue was always that the ice was built up on the tank, And I was always wondering, it seemed like a straightforward solution would be to put some resistive heating into the foam, underneath the foam, and then at the right moment before launch, just turn that on and cause the ice to kind of be loose and have water underneath the ice and would just fall off under the vibration of launch. Was that ever considered? That seemed to have been an interesting solution to that wouldn't have been too complicated.
I don't know the answer. I don't know if that was ever considered. But you know what they did was they had ice teams. You probably know this. They had ice teams that would go out there an hour or so, or maybe more than that, before launch, and give the vehicle a real close inspection and look for ice, and see if we had too much ice. But you know, even even so, what they eventually did, you know, they changed the foam after the Columbia accident. They changed the foam. And I'm not exactly sure what they did when they changed the foam, but then we launched Eileen Collins on the return to flight mission, and that foam came off too.
Yeah.
And so after that, that's when they put heaters on that location on the external tank instead of the foam. Just saying, okay, it's going to form ice, but we're going to melt it off with the heaters. So I think that was how we flew the rest of the shuttle missions.
Yeah, and because of that problem, when I was working on the Vandenberg launch site for shuttle, we were going to put 4 jet engines at the base of the launch pad to keep warm air blowing up over the tank because of the propensity of fog there.
Oh yeah, the morning fog on the California coast.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
Marshall, you want to say something? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
question,
Sorry, Marshall. Let me just say this, and then I'll let you go. John's question was around mitigation, and I just wanted to note the time frame that Hoot was serving in the astronaut corps, because you were part of the '78 selection process, which I think was there had been like 9 years since the last selection process. So there was that interval between Apollo Skylab and the shuttle. You were in that first slot there, right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, there had been 9 years since we picked astronauts. So, gee, and of course, in our class, we had the first women and the first African American astronauts. And so, golly, was there a lot of interest in our class? Uh, not for us boys, but for the women and the African Americans, and my office mate for the first 4.5 years that I was there at NASA, Ellison Onizuka, who was a Hawaiian American, and so he had Oriental background as well. It's funny. He was asked by a reporter one time, "How's it feel to be one of the first minority astronauts?" And he said, "Shoot, I didn't think I was one."
I was one of the first people scrubbed from that cadre.
Say that again.
I was one of the first people scrubbed from that astronaut cadre. I did put in an application.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Well,
It was
And
acknowledged. That was it.
Yeah, and just to finish the thought, so you started in the '78 class and you finished in 1996, right?
That's right. That's when I left NASA. Was 1996.
Okay. All right.
Marshall, go for your question. You've been waiting a long time.
Yeah. My question is, you made a reference to the space shuttle being the airlines of space, and how many G's did you take on going up, coming down, and even more important, if you had the chance, would you go now in your condition?
Oh, sure, I'd go again. I would love to go again. but yeah, we really didn't pull that many G's. Now you wouldn't want to put a bunch of airline passengers through this, because what we would see was right at liftoff, we would see just about exactly 2 G's. And then that, as we're burning off fuel and burning out the solid rocket boosters, the G loading increased to about 2.85 Gs right at burnout of the booster rockets. And then the Gs dropped down to 1 G of linear acceleration and built up to 3 Gs, because we're burning 3,000 pounds of fuel out of the external tank per second, 3,000 pounds per second. And so your weight is going down, your thrust is going up, because there's less and less atmosphere the higher we got. And so the
Yeah.
G's built up to 3 Gs, and then the shuttle throttled the engines to main 3 Gs for about the final minute and a half or so. And if the computer didn't throttle them, we take manual control of the throttle and hold it right at 3G. So that's all you saw. During re-entry, you would see about 2 Gs of vertical acceleration. And of course, part of that was along the flight path because once we're in the atmosphere, of course, we're decelerating constantly all the way down. And but that's all you'd see. But that reference to the airliner to space, that's what was put out by NASA's public affairs, was that this is the airliner to space. And you don't need parachutes, you don't need life rafts, you don't need anything. You don't wear that stuff on an airliner, so we don't need it. And I never liked that because all of us that came from the tactical jet community said this thing is even bigger and faster and higher flying than my tactical jet, and I wouldn't fly that without a parachute. But I flew this one twice without a parachute.
Yeah.
Bill,
My key point is in the future, we're going to have those same constraints in launching the average person into space. And I don't see that happening until we get a spaceship that basically can stay under 2 Gs all the way up, all the way down, et cetera, et cetera. And that's also an issue with cargo.
That's going to be hard to do. That's going to be hard to do. But yeah, well, I don't think we're going to be opening the doors and saying, "Come one, come all, hop aboard a rocket to space." It's still going to be a special reason and a special purpose and specially selected astronauts.
Yeah. Special people.
Bill, go ahead.
You're muted.
Bill, you're muted. Come on.
Sorry, I was blown away by the fact that both Apollo and the space shuttle launched with people on them, really for the first time, like a very complicated system just succeeding the first time like that, and astronauts trusting it, to go right to space without killing them. To me, that's amazing. And I was wondering, what do you think the culture needs to be of a company that makes a system like that? Like, if you compare NASA culture to, say, Boeing or Airbus culture, or to the culture of a defense contractor that makes jet fighters, or to like the Silicon Valley culture, which is maybe what SpaceX is using. What do you think is the right culture for making something like the space shuttle that just works the first time and is a very complicated system?
Well, NASA has a very thorough and intensive safety organization, and they have some very specific requirements and standards for human capable vehicles, and they enforce those very rigorously. And as they have progressed from Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and all of those, they've learned more and incorporated more and more, and they have no patience for anything less than perfect. And that's what it takes. That's what it takes to be able to do this. And they have been very, very successful. The only times we weren't successful were when we let our guard down with Challenger and Columbia, and the Apollo fire. The Apollo fire. After we had that, there were so many engineering organizations that said, "Wait a minute, you guys are running high pressure, 100% oxygen in the capsule." They were running 16.7 psi, 100% O2 in the Apollo capsule. And what will burn in that kind of an environment? Everything, anything and everything. And there were so many organizations that came in and said, "NASA, what were you guys thinking? You should have known better than that." And that's what put in place, an oversight committee. I'm trying to remember what the acronym is for it now, but it's an independent organization of experts in every discipline that meets about once a quarter and looks at what NASA is doing, what they're proposing, what they're planning, where they're going to go, and offers some safety inputs. And so it's it is a very rigorous safety culture, and the times we got bit were when we backed off of our very rigorous culture with Challenger and with Columbia. We had been hit a number of times with foam in the case of Columbia, and we said, well, it'll probably be okay one more time. The same with Challenger. We had burned O-rings, and it'll probably be okay one more time. And those were horrible, expensive lessons, expensive in human life. And so I think they have implemented everything they possibly could from that. And so but it's a never-ending battle. It's a never-ending fight.
Who,
Yeah,
It
that's
does-
the
it
No
does-
NASA,
oxygen. Oh, sorry.
I think
I was
that's the
gonna say,
NASA Safety Advisory
Uh-huh.
Council. The NASA Safety Advisory Council.
Yes, Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel.
Aerospace,
Yeah,
right.
ASAP. Thank you. Yeah. Struggling to find that acronym.
Hoot, I wanted to change focus a little bit. Why Southwest Airlines? And did you enjoy flying for Southwest?
I loved it. Yeah, and you wouldn't think, okay, I was a fighter pilot, right? Afterburners, down the runway and straight up. You're not going to do that with a 737. But you wouldn't think that after having been a fighter pilot, that flying a great big trash hauler like that could possibly be fun. But it was fun. And the challenges were different. Your challenges were to be as efficient as you could be, minimize your fuel burn as much as you possibly can, because that affects obviously the profitability of the organization. I was extremely impressed with Southwest Safety Organization. And in fact, Southwest started in 1970, and we have had one fatal accident. And that was the airplane that landed on the ice in Chicago Midway Airport, slid on the ice and went through the fence at the end of the runway, hit a car and killed a person in the car. That's the one fatal accident that Southwest has ever had, starting from 1970 to today. And I flew with a lot of different pilots in my 10 years. I only got to have 10 years with them, 5 years as a co-pilot and 5 years as a captain, because I had to start at the very bottom, just like everybody else. You don't, your background and experience, that's what gets you hired. That doesn't move you up in the seniority list. So it's all based on date of hire and seniority. So I had 5 years as a co-pilot and 5 years as a captain. I never flew with a pilot that I didn't think was just an excellent pilot. And I think part of the reason that the pilots have been so good at Southwest was they have a motto: we only hire captains. And to get hired by Southwest Airlines, you had to already have your air transport pilot certificate, your ATP, and your Boeing 737 type rating. At any other airline on the face of the earth, you only had to have a commercial license and an instrument rating. And so, therefore, they only hire captains. And so that, I think that has a lot to do with the safety record that they have. And it was fun. Like I say, your job is to make your passengers feel like they're sitting in their living room.
Was the transition to a commercial airline corporation passenger a big deal compared to military and NASA and that bureaucracy and those regulations?
It was kind of a big deal, David, because you operated on company procedures. Everything was done by company procedures. The checklists were very specific. You didn't abbreviate checklists. You didn't abbreviate the wording in the checklist. It was to be stated exactly the way it reads. And so it was command and response on all of the checklists. And the way we managed, anti-icing and de-icing was very specifically spelled out. So there were a whole lot of things that I had to learn about before I would be ready to be a captain. And so, I might have been ready sooner than 5 years. But, in my first year of doing it, I think if someone had said to me, hey, how'd you like to be a captain right now? I would have had to say, I'm not ready. I have got to finish memorizing and learning where to look up all the procedures and all the techniques, because we could fly down to 50-foot decision height using a heads-up display. We didn't have auto land, but we had something that was just as good, in fact, if not even better. We manually flew, the captain manually flew the airplane using a very advanced heads-up display, and our decision height was 50 feet. And I never failed to get into the airport that I was going to. If the weather really was 700 RVR, 700 RVR, 700 RVR, the three sensors along the runway, if it really was 700 on all of those, you would always make it in and land. And so it was as good as Autoland. And so it was an excellent system.
With your experience as a 737 captain in the military and NASA, could you hop into a 777 and fly it?
I probably could. I haven't done that, but I probably could. It would sit a lot higher off the ground than a 737, but I don't think it sits as high off the ground as the space shuttle, because at touchdown we were 10 degrees angle of attack, and our eye height I think was 37 feet on touchdown in the shuttle. Now you've got radar altimeter anyway, and so that's telling you the distance that your wheels are above the runway. And so I could probably fly a 777. I haven't done that, but I probably could fly one.
Interesting.
I have a follow-up question to Phil's question, if I could, David. And that is, talking about a first flight and putting people on a first flight. You flew the chase plane, one of the chase planes for STS-1. Can you give us a sense of what the mood was like around that flight? Because I can't imagine how much pressure there must have been, everybody waiting for that first flight of humans on the space shuttle.
Yeah, Bill, I describe it as exhilaration is what it was, because we had been working towards this for so long, and I was only on board for anyway, 4.5 years before we launched. But all the people that had been struggling in the trenches leading up to STS-1 in April of 1981, I was pretty exhilarated as a chase plane. I was chase 4 for STS-1, and then I got to be chase 1 for STS-2 and train a whole new group of chase pilots for STS-2. And that was sure exciting. That was sure exciting. But everyone was, we were so focused on success. We really believed that we were going to do this, and we were going to do it safely on the first mission. So sure, there's always the possibility, but flying the combat mission, you weren't sure you were going to come back. And I think the tactical jet guys, realized that this is not an airliner to space, even though NASA was trying to sell us that. But by golly, it sure worked great so many times. And the only times we let it down is when it let us down. And so we messed up on Challenger and we messed up on Columbia. And other than that, 133 successful missions.
We're about to go to the moon with commercial companies, first-time hardware for this kind of mission. Sometimes first-time hardware with a company even making a rocket. First-time spacesuit company. Very, very different from what we did with the shuttle and the Apollo program. How comfortable are you with the new approach, the new providers, the safety checks, the oversight, the overview, the complexities? What do you think?
Well, I'm very comfortable with it, and in fact, I raised my hand and said, "Hey, send me. I'd be happy to go." And Reed Wiseman on Artemis 2 was a former chief astronaut. I'm a former chief astronaut as well, so why don't we send me? But they're going to say, Hoot, haven't you been greedy enough with 5 trips to space already? And I guess the answer is yes, I have been greedy enough already. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I said, okay, it's probably time for me to go ahead and go. I was the first person to fly 4 missions as commander. And there's only one other astronaut who flew 4 times as mission commander, Jim Weatherby. And if I had continued to fly, I would have been mission commander more times after that. And one of my thoughts was, I'm keeping the other guys from being a mission commander. And so really, it really is time for me to go. I've been greedy enough, but I would love to go again. And if they'd invite me, I'll pack my bags. I'd be there tomorrow. So yes, but I am, to answer your exact question, I am very pleased with the safety aspects of it and all the rigor that has been put into it. And golly, look at the Artemis launches. Flawless, both of them virtually flawless. It's funny that on Artemis 2, what did they have trouble with? They had trouble with the toilet, and they had a little bit of trouble with the temperature control. When I flew the 10th shuttle launch, we had trouble with both of those things on the 10th launch, the toilet and also temperature control. When we were on the daylight side of the Earth, it was too warm, and when we were on the dark side of the Earth, it was too cold. We figured that out by the time I think of my second launch, which was the 24th launch. But those are about the only anomalies I heard talked about in the Artemis program. So it's been very, very successful and very, very safe so far. And if we keep our eye on the goal and don't get distracted like we did with Challenger and Columbia, we have every reason to believe we can do this safely. And I'd love to do it.
AJ, you haven't spoken, so why don't you go, and then John Hunter
Okay.
and Alice
Yeah.
to close.
Hoot, I sort of read through some of your excerpts from the book on Amazon. One question I have is that I think I think you sort of mentioned this already, which is that you had to send the video encrypted on that secret flight that you were talking about. Did you also have to, I'm just trying to understand, have to speak to the Houston command in encrypted fashion, or were you talking to them regularly? Because I guess you kind of mentioned near the end that you kind of talk to them unencrypted. Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, no, I did not talk to them unencrypted. And in fact,
Oh.
every shuttle mission,
Uh-huh.
the voice downlink to the ground and the voice uplink is encrypted. So it can't be busted by anybody. So now there is a UHF ultra high frequency radio backup that we would have up for launch. And so if I remember right, anything we said to mission control on the downlink would go out on the UHF radio as well. But of course, for the secret mission, we wouldn't run the UHF. But the voice link was always encrypted, up and down. So that was always encrypted.
That's interesting. Other question I have is that I think one of the places you mentioned that one of the shuttle flights coming back, you landed almost at 0 feet per second vertical speed. That was really interesting. I mean, you also mentioned that might have been 0.1, but that was very interesting for me to hear that. That was really a good landing, I would say. Is that correct?
It was. Yes, it was a good landing, and that was the best one I made. They weren't all 0.0 sync rate. And what the engineers do is they take out all the accelerometer biases and the whatever it is they also correct for. And that's what gave me a 0.0 feet per second sync rate on touchdown. But it was a very accurate landing because it was we're targeting 205 knots for touchdown speed on a heavyweight orbiter. And I think I was 204.6 knots. See,
Yeah.
I was off. I was off 4/10 of a
Oh.
knot. But that was the third time that I was landing
Mhm.
the space shuttle, and then I
Mhm.
landed it. I landed it a fourth time as well on my final mission, my fifth flight to space.
One last question is, have you worked with Jim Adamson and Perezinski? Those are the two people that I know, two astronauts that I know. Jim Adamson, of course, of shuttle astronaut also.
Yes, yeah. Jim Adamson came to us from the Army. He was an Army helicopter pilot,
Oh,
and uh, oh, tell me again who was the other one you mentioned?
Perezinski, I may not be
Oh,
pronouncing it correctly.
of
Correctly.
course, Perezinski. Yes,
Yeah.
he had competed. He had competed in the Olympic luge,
Yeah.
and I was part of the selection board that picked him to be an
Oh,
astronaut. And
really?
he was a standout. He really impressed us with his background
Yeah.
and with his humility and everything about him was just one of those that you said, yeah, we need this man. We need this man
I,
in the space
I
program.
think he climbed Mount Everest also, but I'm not positive
You're
on that.
right.
I think.
You're right. He did. I think it took him two tries,
Oh, mm,
but he did make it to the top of Everest. So
oh, okay. Very good. Yeah. Thank you.
Dallas, you, and then John Hunt.
So talk about your docking with Mir and what was that like being at the Mir space station with the shuttle?
that was a real thrill. And I'll tell you something interesting about my having flown STS-71, the first docking. And it goes back to when I was first selected to be chief astronaut, which was about 2 years before that. And I was in an interview with Space News, and they said, "Well, gee, Hoot, um, the first Mir docking is going to be coming along the way here in about 2 years. Are you going to assign yourself to that mission?" And I launched off into my speech about that is not the job of a leader, is to skim off the good deals for yourself. I will not assign myself to do the Mir docking. That is going to be such a fabulous mission. I'm not going to do that. That's not what you do as a leader. As a leader, you are there to take care of your people. Well, fast forward now 2 years later, and I had put together the crew for that mission because as the chief astronaut, I'm the one who picks the astronauts. I'm the one that picks the crews because who knows them better than me? Nobody. And so that was my job, was to put the crews together. And by the way, that was a very labor intensive job because you had to look at, okay, what are the backgrounds of the 5 or 7 crew members? What are their previous flights? What is this flight going to be about? And and is it time for them to go to space again, or should they be working as an engineer for another year or so? Anyway, there was a lot of effort that went into it. And my boss, the director of flight operations, called me one day and he said, "Hoot, they like your Mir docking crew." And I said, "Great," because it was a great crew. I picked them. And so it was a great crew. And then he said, with one exception. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was mad instantly because in my 2 years of being chief, not one of my crews had been messed with. Because again, who knows them better than me? And I was dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say. And he finally said, "They want you to command it." Now I'm double dumbfounded. And he said, "What's your reaction to that?" And I said, "Dave, for 2 years now, I've been telling people I'm not going to assign myself to the Mir docking flight. I wanted Steve Nagel to do it. I said, Steve will do a fine job of it. I want Steve to do it." And he said, "Okay, I'll go charge headquarters again." And he called me about a week later and he said, "Hoot, they still want you to do it." And I said, "Dave, I still don't want to do it." And he said, "Okay, I'll try one more time." And so he tried one more time and he called me about a day later or 2 days later and he said, "Hoot, do me a favor." And I said, "Sure, Dave, anything." He said, "Shut up and go do the Mir docking." And I said, "Okay, Dave, I give up. I'll do it uh, on one condition. If you'll come over here to Building 4 and make the announcement and tell my astronauts why this is happening, that I was not going to put myself on that mission." Well, having said all that, what a fascinating mission that was. I am really glad I got to do it. I wish it hadn't come about the way that it did, but it was a, it was the most challenging mission that I had. And docking in the space shuttle is flown manually by the commander.
Right.
He or she takes manual control when we get within about 4 miles of docking. Before that, the burns, we're performing a number of burns, and but the vehicle, we've put it into an automatic tracking the center of the earth attitude hold mode. And but as we get up close to docking, now I'm firing thrusters to fly up the approach to the docking ring. We did a negative Z approach, so we flew under the Mir space station and then flew straight up to docking from about a mile below. And the tolerances were very tight. I had to stay within a 10-degree cone around the docking port outside of 1,000 feet. But inside 1,000 feet, I had to stay within 5 degrees, if I'm remembering it right.
Pretty close.
And I had to line the center lines. It was not self-centering. My docking ring was just a big 4-foot diameter ring, and the ring on the Mir space station was a 4-foot diameter ring. So they weren't self-centering. I had to line up the centers within 3 inches, or else we'd bounce off. And so having made it sound really difficult. Oh, and the closure rate, 1/10 of a foot per second. Plus or minus 0.03 feet per second. And they said, Hoot, if you hit it at 2/10 of a foot per second, you'll break the docking ring. And so it was fairly tight constraints on docking. Now, having said all that, we had done close to 100 dockings in the simulator. So it came off without a hitch. It came off without a hitch, and we burned 24% less fuel than what they had budgeted for. And so again, you know, who was it? Tom Watson said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. And so we had done a lot of practicing. And like I say, I think just about 100 dockings in the simulator, and it paid off. And it worked just fine.
So when you were named the commander, did the crew size change, or did it stay constant and somebody was left off?
It stayed constant. And so instead of Steve Nagel, who was a fine young man, Air Force pilot from my class, from the 1978 class, and a dear friend of mine. So he didn't get to do it, but I did. But the rest of the crew stayed.
He got to fly later.
The rest of the crew stayed exactly the same, because this was a very good crew, because this was a really important mission. Oh, and I did find out something later on. Now, this is going to sound self-serving, but what had happened on the Russian side was that in the Apollo-Soyuz docking 20 years earlier, we had done 2 dockings. Deke Slayton flew one of them, and Tom Stafford, the mission commander, flew the other one. One of those dockings, we rammed them so hard we nearly broke the thing. And the Russians never forgot that. And now 20 years later, here we come with our 250,000-pound space shuttle to attack their station. And the Russians were real nervous. And the higher ups at NASA told me that what they were doing was they had to tell the Russians, okay, this is so important, we're sending our chief astronaut to command the mission. So like I say, it's going to sound self-serving, but that's what actually happened. So it was to placate the Russians.
Thank you.
Hunt, you want to say something, John Hunt?
Yes. With your experience with all their flying, and particularly the commercial airliners, we're reflecting back to 9/11 and the guy that rammed the airplane into the Pentagon. Does it make sense somebody had never even learned to properly fly a single-engine airplane and never flew a jet airliner before could have actually accomplished that?
They did have some simulator training,
Right.
and I don't know how much, but they had flown simulators.
With a PC though, right? Like Flight Simulator, the computer game, right?
Oh, they had gone to let me think I don't remember who it was. They had gone to the commercial aerospace training places like
Hmm.
flight systems, or who was it? Anyway,
I think it was in Florida. They went to
Yeah.
Florida for the training.
yeah, they had done some training, and I
Hmm.
remember um,
Yeah.
they were a bunch of jerks. And of course,
Of course.
these were
Terrorists.
guys that were going to go kill themselves. And I remember they got told in the course of their training, if you don't change your attitude, we're going to wash you out of all of this training. And
Hmm.
so they had been doing some, uh, I guess, level D simulator training.
But I
And
mean,
so,
actually, like the airlines would
oh
put
yes,
people in it.
airliners, yeah, big
Not
airliners.
just. I always understood that just be on a computer game, but there was a computer game called Flight Simulator, which is like on a PC.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I have that program, but
Yeah.
I hardly ever fly it. But no, they had gone to the professional airline training things and flown simulated airliners,
Hmm.
simulations of airliners, and so they knew basically how to do that. So
Interesting.
they had some training, and
That's
like
a
I said,
point I never got before. I
they
thought that
almost
was just a computer game.
yeah, they almost got washed out because of their attitudes, because they were here to kill Americans. And
Of course,
so
they were
that
terrorists, but
that attitude showed through in some of the training, and they got told,
mhm.
the ones that were training them didn't realize that's why they were here, but they had trouble with them because of that.
Okay.
Did
Hmm.
you ever,
I have a quick question for you. And this just occurred to me, so I haven't evaluated the wisdom of asking you this. So you tell me if it's not a good question. But the question is, when you were first coming along after you were selected as an astronaut, who within the astronaut corps did you look up to and why?
Oh, gee, Bill, I I think I looked up at everybody because I was the youngest pilot in that class. I was the, they there had been 9,000 qualified applicants that met the requirements, and they picked 20 mission specialist candidates and 15 pilot candidates, and I was the youngest one. And so I was looking up to everybody. I guess I'd have to say John Young was Navy, and he was the chief astronaut at the time. So of course I'm looking way up towards John Young, and
Sure.
he was a heck of a crewman, and he had flown 4 times prior to shuttle, 2 Geminis and 2 Apollo missions. And so, yeah, I guess I'd have to say it was John Young that I admired the most when I got there.
Were there other Gemini astronauts, other astronauts that went as far back as Gemini in the program at the time you joined?
Let me think. Um, I don't think there were that were still active astronauts. Um, and I'm trying to remember now. Golly, that was 1978 when I got there. I'm trying to remember who all the active astronauts were. Vance Brand was there. Ed Gibson was there. It's funny, when I interviewed, Ed Gibson looked at my name tag and he said, "We can't have 2 Gibsons here. That would be too confusing." And so I thought, oh, great, I'm out of luck already. I haven't even had the interview, and I've been told I can't be here. But Ed Gibson was here. Deke Slayton was still there, but not as an active astronaut. He was a manager at that point. And let me think. Oh boy, I'd have to really rack my brain to remember who all was there.
did you ever have a crew problem during a mission? And then for fun, since you flew fighters out of Miramar, did you see the Top Gun movies? Did you enjoy them? Are they realistic? What was your assessment of that?
Well, I loved the Top Gun movies. They are such great entertainment. But buzzing the tower, you could do that once. You could do that once. And they would reach on your chest and pull your wings off is what they would do. And of course that happened to pilots. I know of a pilot that I understand he flew under the Coronado Bridge in a jet fighter. And that was the last flight he made as a pilot. Where he was lucky. The Navy said, "Okay, well, we'll let you continue as a Rio, as a backseater." But there, a lot of the things that were in Top Gun, you could do once, but you wouldn't be flying after that. And so I never felt the urge to buzz the tower, and
Mhm.
Oh, inverted flight, like they were doing in Top Gun.
well, you know where that came from? That came from Randy Cunningham, the Navy's first MiG ace, and he actually did that to a Russian Bear bomber that was trying to force him down towards the water. So he got out from under the bear that was descending with him under it and flew over the top of it upside down and gave the pilot the finger, flying inverted right above the cockpit of the Bear bomber. So that's where that came from in the movie, was from Randy Cunningham.
Did you ever have a crew disturbance during a mission?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And you know, it didn't matter whether, you know, didn't have any problems at all on my first mission where I was the co-pilot, and I didn't have any problems at all with any of my crew members. You know, um, there was a solid enough chain of command leading up to the mission commander that, you know, whatever I said, that was what we were going to do, and 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 it was all very straightforward. We all knew what we were going to do, and so there was no confusion and no arguing about anything. It was all very straightforward. And we got to know each other very well because for each mission, you trained for a year. So I had trained with each of my crew members for a solid year before we went to space. And if there had been any issues or any disputes or anything like that, you've had a whole year to work them out. And so it went very, very well.
And do you still fly?
Yes, I do. I have my V-tail Bonanza, and I also have I have a Formula One air racer. Started life as a Cassett, designed by Tom Cassett, and it's a small, tiny little airplane, 20 and a half foot wingspan. With me in it, full of fuel, it weighs about 820 pounds. It's got 100 horsepower, so it has about 8.2 pounds per horsepower power loading. So it's a hot rod. It'll do 155 miles an hour on a 100 horsepower engine. And so I tell people it's like having a baby jet.
Great. Listeners, do you have any additional comments or questions for Hoot or about his book? Bill, you've read his book. What are we missing?
Well, one thing I would say about the book is, I think most listeners, especially, would find the stories interesting. But one thing I appreciated about it is that it's got some nice photographs in it, and not just like 2 pages of black and white pictures. It's many color photographs scattered throughout the text. So it's visually very attractive, and it also conveys a lot of information, like you were talking about the hole that was in the shuttle that you returned on from the secret mission, um, and you actually can see a photograph of it and pretty good detail.
The missing tile. Yeah, I wanted color photos interspersed throughout the book, located where I'm talking about what's in the photo. And so, like you mentioned, Bill, the so many books have black and white photos in the middle of the book all together and nowhere else. And I really wanted the colored photos interspersed where I'm talking about what's in the photo. And that costs extra in the cost of putting the book together, but I really wanted that, and so I didn't care what it cost to do that. Yeah, so thank you for the comment.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was wondering if you formed any opinions on what you would have done if you were like NASA administrator, and would you have continued the space shuttle program? Would you have set your sights on the moon and said, let's do a lunar program, or set your sights on Mars? Like what would you have done if you had that sort of power?
Well, I thought it was such a fabulous vehicle, except for the times that we hampered it and did it all wrong. I thought it was such a fabulous vehicle and so wonderful to be landing on a runway as opposed to coming down in the ocean. And the flexibility of it. With the gliding reentry, we could make up 723 miles of cross range because we're a gliding reentry. With the capsules, you can make up a little bit of cross range. I don't know how much. I can't imagine it's more than about 50 miles or so by orienting the heat shield and the vehicle during the reentry. But with the shuttle, we could fly it in a constant bank angle all the way down from the top of the atmosphere to landing. And what that does for us is that makes many, many more landing opportunities and much more flexibility because it's a gliding vehicle. So I suppose I could have been outvoted by the safety organization if I were the NASA administrator at the time, but I would have wanted to continue the shuttle. We had done so much to design it, build it, and refine it over the space of 30 years, and it really had become a very reliable machine. And
Is there anything you would have done to improve it? Like, would you have come up with a shuttle? What's the next shuttle? Shuttle C or something like that? And what would that have looked like?
the one thing that we left out that we should have been a little bit more eager to do was a crew escape system. An escape pod that could come down by parachute. Uh, if we had designed it properly, we could have saved the Columbia crew and we could have saved the Challenger crew if we had built in an escape system. And what we wound up with after the Challenger accident was we, the astronauts, made sure that we got the Rogers Commission to put in their report, NASA, you need to provide a means of bailout from a gliding orbiter for the crew so that we have some ability to save the crew. Because if we were coming down in the ocean, that wasn't going to be survivable at the speeds that we're coming in at. And the orbiter was just barely strong enough to do what it was to do. I think the design G loading in the vertical direction was 2.5 Gs. And landing it in the ocean, it would have destroyed the vehicle and probably been unsurvivable. And so, if we were coming down in the ocean, you'd want to bail out. You certainly would not want to try to land it. And so it was things like that. So if we had built into it an escape system for the crew, we would have lost both of those vehicles, but we could have saved 14 astronauts. And so I think that's what really made everyone say it's time to retire it because we're going to kill the astronauts anytime we have a major malfunction of the vehicle during launch or reentry.
We've talked about the problems in continuing the shuttle, but the one issue that has not been brought up is what the shuttle was costing at the time and what was going on with the country and budgets and the economy. So if you were that NASA administrator, and I don't know who here remembers what the economic concerns were, but the shuttle was pretty expensive to launch. How would you be able to sell it, given forgetting all the other factors we've talked about tonight, but just the high cost of dealing with the shuttle, preparing it, retrofitting it, launching it, emissions. It was a pretty costly vehicle.
Oh, it was, and NASA had justified the cost, and the Congress approved it and believed in it, and so it kept getting funded, and it was costing that same amount the whole time that we were flying it, and so we could have continued to do it as well. But like I say, the real reason that it was retired was that it was such a problem when it goes wrong, and we're going to lose all the astronauts. And so that was the real reason that it was shut down when it was, because it was a really useful vehicle. I mean, it's the reason that we were able to build the International Space Station was because we could fit a 60-foot long payload, 60-foot long, 15 feet in diameter in the cargo bay. And that's what let us build the International Space Station. So it was a very utilitarian vehicle, and NASA had explained the cost and been able to continue continue to fly it and get the country to fund it. So, but again, that's not what did it in. What did it in was the risk to the astronauts.
Eric, we're at 90 minutes. So does anyone have a closing comment?
Yeah.
I know that who wanted to sort of limited it here. So closing comments.
Quick one, Hoot. In my opinion, the slide pole that you talked about was never really survivable. Did you have a different opinion of that?
I'm sorry, say it again.
The
escape pole?
The slide pole, the escape pole. I never thought that would be survivable on the way in.
Well, it would have a narrow window.
Okay.
You have a point. You have a point there because we had a very well defined set of steps that we had to do. We had to survive the pullout into the atmosphere, and we had to be in gliding flight, and we had to wait till 40,000 feet. And at 40,000 feet, we would dump the cabin because you can't try to open that hatch with pressure inside. And then at 35, if I remember right, it was like 35,000 feet, jettison the side hatch and extend the pole and then start bailing out. Now you're coming down at a pretty good rate because that's what the space shuttle does in a glide. It comes down at a pretty good rate. And so it was going to be touch and go to be able to do it. And what wound up happening was it was better than nothing. It was better than what we had before. And they had done actual bailouts, not from a shuttle, but from an airplane with a simulated shuttle hatch and the pole in it. So there had been PJs
Right.
who had actually done bailouts like that. And so it could have worked, but everything would have had to work right for it. But again, it was better than nothing.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest selling point. It was better than not having anything.
That's right. It was better than nothing. That's right.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, yes, sir. That's a great question.
Anyone else have a closing comment? Hoot, do you want to say something, or Tony, do you want to add something?
Well, I'll just add that at the beginning of this, Bill had talked about our panel discussion at ISDC that I was, privileged to lead with Hoot, as well as Susan Kilrain, who was one of only 3 women to pilot the space shuttle and one of the first female Tomcat pilots in the Navy, and Dr. Steve Hawley, who's an astronomer by trade, but he also flew 5 missions, part of Hoot's class. They also both have books coming out. The official release date for their books is July 14th, but I think we have signed copies now available through our website. So, but again, hopefully maybe we can get them on here on this show in the future too as well.
Absolutely. What is your website? Tell everybody.
It's bookpresspublishing.com.
Okay. Hoot, got another book in you?
Oh, gee, I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. I pretty well got everything in the book. I got all my air racing and experimental aircraft flying and all of those things in it. And did all that with only, I think, 284 pages or 287 pages. Tony kept pressuring me saying, Hoot, this book's getting too long. No one's going to want to read it. It's too big. And my reply was, Tony, I only want to do this one time, so I want to get it all into this book. So I think I got it all in the book. So I probably don't have to do another one.
But I will say, if you're looking for a more comprehensive book about the shuttle program, whose book is about a much broader aviation career. Steve Hawley's book he was at NASA for 30 years, and Steve's book is pretty much, even though it's a memoir, it's a comprehensive overlook of the entire shuttle program, start to finish. So it's longer too. It's pushing 500 pages.
Yeah.
Are you on the West Coast or East Coast, Hoot?
I'm sorry?
Are you on the East or West Coast now?
Neither one. I'm just southeast of Nashville, Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Okay.
If I may say so, Hoot, you are a very nice person, I must say. And I'm very, very happy to have known you, just to know you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. That just warms my heart. Thanks so very much.
Um,
And I would like to say, Hoot, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an honor to talk with you. Thanks for all your service over the years, and I'd love to cross paths with you again sometime.
Yeah, let's make sure that happens. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that too.
you going to go flying on July 4th for the 250th, or are you going to do something special with your Bonanza or your other plane?
Probably big family party on July the 4th. My daughter wants to host a party, and so probably won't go flying at all. So, but that's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, and listeners. His book has a lot more in it than what we've been able to talk about tonight. So if you enjoyed this, you'll really enjoy reading his book. So I want to thank Bill for helping us out tonight and arranging the program. AJ, John, Dallas, Bill, and Dr. Sherry Bell, who hasn't said a word yet tonight. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, I can say something. Hi, Tony, and hi, Hoot.
Hi, Sherry.
I came in late. I had another NSS meeting, so I came in pretty late. I only was available the last 20 minutes. But I appreciate the things both you guys are doing, and I thank you very much for coming on this show.
Well, this was a lot of fun. The space show was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until the next program, and everybody have a great week. Keep looking up, and thank you again to Hoot and to Tony for making a great book available to all of us and to all of the rest of you. Good night from the Space Show.
Thank you.
Right.
So,